Welcome to Holy Voices, where timeless truth meets your present journey. If you are here, it is not by accident. Your spirit was led to this place for a reason. Every word you will hear carries light, strength, and direction for your path. Stay with us, and let this message unlock the wisdom waiting inside you. The harvest belongs to the sower. Plant your $50 seed into Holy Voices and prepare for your season of breakthrough. Your God and the very gene they called upon to destroy you are eradicating the members of this evil cult, chosen one. And the cult that tried you while you were living your life in utter ignorance is definitely smoking your God. In their pitiful emergency conference, these idiots asked how the person was still alive after hurling everything they owned at you, including entities that could break mortal brains, ancient artifacts, and prohibited knowledge, only to watch it all backfire spectacularly because they never realized that denying someone their heavenly appointment is equivalent to them issuing their own cosmic death sentence. These so-called experts in metaphysical dominance sat here, gazing at indisputable evidence that you had totally destroyed their endeavors. Every ritual they had meticulously planned to destroy you had not only failed, but had reacted with exponential power in their direction. Their attempts to hurt you had just signed their own cosmic death sentence, and they were unable to understand that you represent someone whose protection was etched into the very fabric of existence itself. But let me tell you what was really going on as this organization squandered resources in its pointless assault against you, selected one. In your subconscious mind, you were developing skills that would eventually reveal every corner of their shadow kingdom. Even while those folks seemed magnetic to everyone else, those instinctual moments when you would suddenly shudder away from them weren't random incidents. Your spiritual reconnaissance was that. Systems, identifying the monitoring networks the cult had woven around your life, and automatically guiding you away from carefully planned traps before your conscious mind could even comprehend the threat. Ancient battle masters would bow down in awe at the genuinely astonishing dimension of this cosmic chess match, which was developing with such strategic genius. As the cult obsessively focused on cutting off your spiritual and intuitive pathways, they were utterly unaware that their efforts to block your metaphysical flow were creating the exact resistance needed to magnify your gifts beyond what would have naturally emerged. The group was methodically creating the very tool that would eventually devour all of its members. One disastrous error in judgment at a time. Imagine the growing anxiety as intelligence reports persisted, validating their worst fears, the infiltrator infiltrating your social circle. Someone with extensive training in spiritual destruction and psychological manipulation started sending you more distress messages about how their meticulously crafted facade was showing through to you. Every lie that is said eventually crystallizes into blatant deceit for the intended audience. With increasing hysteria, the operative reported, "Every manipulation tactic fails miserably. This individual has started asking me questions that I wasn't ready to answer. Additionally, they seem to have magical sensing abilities that function at frequencies that are incomprehensible to me." At the same time, another agent assigned to destroy your career path discovered that they were recording experiences that contradicted all of the preconceived notions about metaphysical warfare. The desperate admission to handlers was that tactics that have destroyed innumerable prior targets are not only failing, but seem to be igniting previously unheard of success. Every obstacle we build becomes a springboard. Every chance we pass up results in several better options. The universe itself seems to have been militarized especially to protect this person. The most psychologically damaged of all was probably the financial warfare expert hired to destroy your financial base. This individual had mastered the sinister art of spiritual money manipulation and was able to precisely manipulate energy patterns to bring about unintended financial disasters in the lives of their targets. However, each deliberate attack on your revenue streams has caused unexplainable windfalls to appear in your world. Around this individual, the basic laws of cause and effect seemed to function completely in reverse. The repeated reports reached anyone who was still open to hearing them. Every harmful frequency we send is alchemically transformed into a positive manifestation. They seem to have a metaphysical immunity that turns our hexes into advantages. When the group started to experience what they first explained away as coincidences, true panic began. Events that are too carefully planned to be accidental but too covert to be perceived as overt assaults. The first practitioner to interact directly with you started having intense night images of unidentified ancient warriors. Beings that appeared to know personal history intimately yet never shared it with any living being. These were not just unsettling dreams. The visions were intrusive psychological intrusions that turned sleep into nightly questioning sessions led by invisible prosecutors. They were filled with particular information about childhood terrors and deepest shame. The shaky confession to coworkers, my voice breaking under fatigue, was something that pierced my consciousness. This isn't just any random thing either. I feel like I have a whole battalion of ancestors that I have never met, but who somehow have full access to my mental blueprint. The second practitioner became obsessively interested in genealogical research websites and spent endless hours tracking down family branches they had never looked into before. Everything they believed to be true about the spiritual defenses encircling their organization was called into question by the findings of this inquiry. All blood relatives who had ever engaged in shadow arts had experienced unexplained violent outcomes, usually within a generation of their most ambitious endeavors. During emergency assemblies, there seemed to be a cosmic accountability system in place, based on the silent observations. A metaphysical enforcement mechanism that comes into play when certain boundaries are crossed and the penalties seem to be administered retrospectively. The third practitioner, the one who had personally traveled to the farthest reaches of the world to obtain the specialized parts required for their most powerful binding rituals, started to suffer from what could only be described as breakdowns in reality. Things in their home would move in the middle of the night. Mirror reflections would sometimes appear a few seconds later than was physically feasible. As though their very existence were becoming incompatible with the laws of regular physics, electronic devices would malfunction in ways that could not be explained by technical means. The leadership realized they were facing something beyond their understanding or expertise as intelligence kept piling up. However, everyone had become deaf to wisdom due to investment and arrogance. Too much had been given up, too much money had been spent, and too many people had committed to supporting organizations that saw failure as a reason to fire them. We've made too big of an investment to pull out. Now, with the kind of arrogance that usually accompanies legendary falls, the leader declared, "Amplify everything, intensify the assault." If traditional metaphysical warfare doesn't work, it will escalate to hitherto untried methods. The category of high-level spiritual terrorism, which leaves a permanent scar on the fabric of reality itself, was what the cult escalated to Chosen One. The group started attacking not just you but everyone in your circle of love, breaking through barriers that shrewd professionals spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Summoning creatures that, according to ancient writings, once awoken could never be subdued. The cult referred to agreements written in languages that existed before human civilization, searching for beings that wanted payment in the form of sacrifices and human pain that civilized society had purposefully forgotten how to imagine. The initial result was just what they had expected. Your life turned into an unrelenting storm of unfathomable hardships. At critical times, technology would break down. Relationships would abruptly worsen. Medical doctors would be baffled by the patterns of your health fluctuations. Sleep grew difficult to come by, with unsettling dreams that seemed more like supernatural intrusions than normal subconscious activity. Every day presented new difficulties that appeared to be designed with the express purpose of draining your emotional and mental reserves. In reality, what they saw as success was the cosmos giving them enough rope to build their own gallows. The cosmic forces that functioned according to justice ideals beyond human understanding were documenting every escalation they used. At rates that would bankrupt kingdoms, they were accruing compound interest on the spiritual debt they were accruing from every innocent person they hurt in order to get to you. The first sign that their victory was really their downfall appeared when the forces they had called upon to carry out their most drastic operations demanded payment for tasks they had not yet performed. Blood, then fresh flesh, then living sacrifices were suddenly needed by beings that had previously been content with the usual gifts of energy and attention. As its members began to suffer from health crises that their best qualified healers were unable to identify, let alone treat, the operational costs of running their organization began to outweigh the means of small countries. "Something is hunting us," said the practitioner who was tasked with keeping an eye on your romantic relationships. Slightly louder than a whisper. "I feel it following me through the astral planes. It is aware of my home, workplace, and sleeping quarters. Since it may just reshuffle probability until accidents become inevitable, it's like having a cosmic assassin following me without the need for actual weapons. Your career advancement was being hampered by the specialist, who started to experience what they could only call professional haunting. Inexplicably, every customer they served would find billing errors. They were directly responsible for the delays and issues that plagued every project they worked on. Their reputation, which had taken decades to build, started to deteriorate so quickly that former allies began to distance themselves in order to protect themselves from the collateral damage. However, their financial warfare specialist was the source of the most terrifying reports. "I'm being turned against my own prosperity." During what would be their last group meeting, they came clean. "In some way, every dollar I've made via spiritual manipulation is going to organizations that are directly at odds with our business practices. I have never heard of the charities that receive my automatic money. Funds from my investment accounts are being transferred to groups that offer protection services to individuals that are similar to our target." The tipping point came when they discovered that the exact thing they had called upon to carry out their most drastic operations had started pursuing them one by one. This had nothing to do with losing authority over a spiritual servant. Something that appeared to take personal pleasure in their fear was actively pursuing them. Something that was intimately familiar with their deepest worries, their most shamed secrets, and their most carefully veiled transgressions. Before disappearing entirely, the final practitioner to make contact said, "It knows everything. It is aware of the killings, the cover-ups, the money we have embezzled, and the lives we have ruined. Not just for us either. It's going after everyone who has ever helped us, turned a blind eye, or made money off of our operations." Judgment Day is similar, but tailored to each person according to their unique offenses. While this cosmic justice was taking place on spiritual levels, Chosen One, your own life was changing, which you most likely ascribe to natural evolution or personal development. All of a sudden, those metaphysical abilities that had been growing since childhood started to function at levels that even shocked you. Friends began remarking on your extraordinary intuition since you were so good at spotting people's true intentions. You grew so adept at avoiding perilous circumstances that you appeared to have a supernatural ability to be in the right place at the right time. The activation of protective mechanisms that had been set up in your mind before you took your first breath was what you perceived as a spiritual awakening. Each meditation session strengthened your resistance to spiritual deception as well as your inner tranquility. Your link to guardian forces that function outside of the physical world was strengthened by each prayer, in addition to your faith. Positive karma and active spiritual support from beings who specialize in protecting those who serve the light were being generated by every act of kindness. The practitioners who had poured their heart and soul into your destruction started to get intelligence reports that didn't fit their conception of how metaphysical warfare should work. With every strike they made, you were somehow growing stronger, more perceptive, and more shielded rather than degrading under their attack. One agent reported incredulously that every hex we transmit somehow undergoes conversion into blessings. Every effort to block their way opens doors for them that they otherwise would not have had. In some way, every individual we send to trick them becomes a true believer in their cause. When they discovered that you had somehow become aware of their operations without anyone telling you, it was the last revelation that completely destroyed their organization. Through your developing spiritual abilities, you had started to download information that revealed their whole historical network as well as their current operations. Names, addresses, financial arrangements, methods, blackmail materials, and cover-up activities. Someone they had never met, who lived thousands of miles away, and who seemed to have no relation to their world, was somehow learning about everything they had spent generations creating. Their security expert informed them of the underground chambers through a panic transmission. The offshore accounts are known to them. They are aware of the ties to the government. They are aware of the individuals that are missing. They are well informed. Proverbs 27 verse 17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Subscribe to Holy Voices and sharpen faith with us. They appear to have access to our whole database, but they are gathering the data in ways that are invisible to us and unabated. You weren't getting your spiritual downloads from people who might be intimidated or removed. The cosmic archives were the source of the intelligence. The Akashic Records, which preserve thorough recordings of every idea, deed, and purpose that has ever taken place in all facets of life. Cosmic law had forced the same things they had called upon to harm you to become unwilling agents of disclosure, telling the person they had been ordered to attack everything they knew about their summoner's actions. The few surviving members of their inner circle pleaded in hollow, desperate voices, "We need to negotiate. We must figure out a method to stop this before it consumes everyone involved in our operations, no matter how much it costs or what they demand." However, having something to offer that the other side wants is necessary for bargaining. Furthermore, what had? It became abundantly evident that the forces defending you had no interest in agreements, concessions, or partial justice. Their attacks had set off a cosmic correction that was intended to destroy everything they had created through spiritual manipulation, every relationship they had upheld via blackmail and intimidation, and every defense they had bought with sacrifice and blood. However, eliminating specific risks wasn't the only goal of the elimination process. With a particular command that chilled their surviving leadership to the bone, the Chosen One, the exact gene they had summoned and thought would assist their evil purposes, was transformed into a cosmic enforcer. It came out that this ancient creature, whose actual nature they had never cared to investigate beyond its destructive potential, was one of the divine executioners recorded in texts so old that most languages lack the vocabulary to adequately describe their power. They learned too late that some gene groups function as cosmic debt collectors known as heavenly baifs, who are experts at recovering stolen spiritual property and allocating it in accordance with divine law. They had effectively lodged a formal complaint with the universe's Department of Spiritual Justice, complete with a thorough record of their offenses and a demand for prompt enforcement action, the instant they had called upon this creature to attack you. The precision of the gent's procedure was both elegant and horrifying. It started methodically dismantling the spiritual underpinnings that had initially permitted their organization to flourish, as opposed to merely eliminating the cult members. All the spells of protection they had cast over the years began to fall apart. All of the wards they had set up around their properties started to fail. They were left spiritually exposed and exposed to forces they had spent their lives learning to avoid, as every psychic barrier they had built around their identities began to fall apart. The return of your chosen spiritual inheritance that you had stolen was what you were going through. Compound interest was being used to restore all the gifts they had tried to stifle. Cosmic powers that are unaware of human attempts to obstruct divine will were blowing off the hinges of every door they had slammed shut. Even you were astounded by the dramatic enlargement of what was feasible in your life, as every dream they had attempted to destroy was being powerfully brought back to life. The remaining members of the cult, however, were forced to deal with a nightmare that got worse every day. The gene weren't just getting rid of them. Their whole network was being methodically made available to the authorities who could best dismantle their operations. Agencies having the means and incentive to conduct global investigations were receiving reports of financial crimes. Journalists renowned for their persistence in exposing institutional corruption were holding evidence of their ritualistic actions. Prosecutors who focused on cases that other lawyers deemed too upsetting to handle were receiving documentation of their darkest secrets. The entity's comprehension of human systems was turning out to be significantly more advanced than their earlier studies had shown. The jinn were planning their devastation through entirely legal means that would guarantee their atrocities were widely publicized, rather than depending solely on magical horror. It seemed as though this ancient entity had studied contemporary journalism and law enforcement with the same fervor that it had once shown for cosmic justice, developing a hybrid strategy that optimized both short-term repercussions and long-term deterrent effects. The fact that their own summoned being was now collaborating directly with your protecting forces in ways that went against all they believed to be true about spiritual hierarchies, however, was the most psychologically painful part of eliminating them. The gene had not just changed sides. It had turned out that it had been working for you since they had tried to get in touch with it, using their own summoning ceremonies as a Trojan horse to enter their organization from within. Your spiritual defense team had received all of the information they had given the entity over their months of cooperation right away. Before they could put any of the strategies they had discussed in its presence into action, they had all been countered. Every organizational flaw they had disclosed during their planning meetings had been methodically used to hasten their demise. In effect, They had been buying victory by spending huge quantities of money to bankroll their own devastation. When they tried to investigate the entity's true identity and found allusions in old manuscripts that made their blood freeze in their veins, the extent of their error became evident. This was no ordinary jinn. One of the first enforcers chosen by heavenly power to preserve harmony between the spiritual and material worlds was this one. Its specialty was not general destruction, but rather the eradication of people and institutions that exploited spiritual understanding to injure innocent people who were shielded by cosmic law. Since birth, the person you selected has been protected by this entity. Your spiritual profile had been marked in the cosmic registry as someone whose mission was crucial to the current stage of planetary awakening, but neither you nor the cult had known of this arrangement. This automatically triggered the assignment of specialized protection that came into effect the moment someone tried to thwart your divine assignment by using supernatural means. A sophisticated security system had effectively thwarted the cult's attacks, allowing them to move just far enough to justify their total eradication legally. Every ceremony they carried out, every curse they spoke, and every being they called forth had been observed and recorded by forces constructing a solid case for cosmic prosecution. It was not retaliation that destroyed them. In a legal system that functions in accordance with laws more fundamental than anything human civilization has ever imagined, it was the inevitable outcome of due process. You started getting downloads of information that seemed to come from nowhere but felt completely real the moment they entered your mind as their organization began its stunning disintegration. All of a sudden, you recognized patterns in your life that had previously defied explanation. Events that had appeared haphazard or unlucky turned out to be meticulously planned safety measures that had been guiding you away from threats you had never been aware of. It was that job chance that had suddenly vanished. As it turned out, cult associates had entered the organization with the intention of using their position to influence your career path. That seemingly ideal romantic relationship that had ended so suddenly. Cult members had infiltrated your prospective partner and were getting ready to employ emotional blackmail as a means of spiritual assault. That medical emergency that made you completely alter your way of life. Your heightened spiritual defenses had been neutralizing subtle poisoning efforts, and it had been your body's natural reaction. The process of eliminating the jinn was showing you just how much your life had been attacked, but also how thoroughly you had been protected without ever knowing it. Every near miss you've survived, every catastrophe you've barely escaped. Every fortunate event that had seemed too good to be true had been the product of proactive involvement by forces that had been watching over you since you were able to walk. However, the entity's efforts went beyond reactive removal and passive defense. You started to experience what can only be called aggressive blessing as the cult's power structure continued to fall apart. This was the active redistribution of opportunities, resources, and skills that had been taken from you over the years. Through spiritual manipulation, money that had been embezzled from your account started to come back in the form of unanticipated windfalls that had no earthly origin. After being depleted by psychic attacks, energy began to return with such vigor that you found yourself doing tasks that once took months in a matter of days. Hello. This is Mike and Ari interrupting your regularly scheduled show for a brief minute. We are the creators of the Astral Atom Network and the Obsidian Inner Order. We finished being polite. Our battle is a spiritual one. You are aware of it. We are aware of it. And we're working around the clock to complete this objective. We need the ammunition, but I'm craving the blood of a fourth-dimensional archon. Listen, you're doing more than just helping us when you join the Inner Order. They're giving you access to exclusive tools they never meant you to have, including spiritual warfare techniques they stole off the internet, psychic self-defense training, and targeted individual intelligence. And we only meet with selected individuals on Zoom once a week in secret. Real nazis, real family, and real power, no filters or filler. It's a complete victory. You obtain what you require. We are allowed to continue fighting. So, instead of just watching, give this video a like and tell everyone you know about it. Right now, right now, right now. Join the Inner Order of Obsidians. Let's complete the task at hand. The description contains a link. Let's go crazy. using increasingly complex summoning rituals that demanded sacrifices so drastic that even their most ardent members started to wonder if any goal could justify such tactics. The cult's remaining leadership tried one last desperate ploy: direct negotiations with the jinn. However, their attempts to communicate only served to hasten their demise because each ritual gave the creature greater access to their organizational structure and more extensive power to destroy it. They were unaware that neither supernatural bribes nor human negotiation could change the jinn's mandate. It functioned in accordance with cosmic law, which regarded their offenses against you as offenses against the divine order. Their eradication was not motivated by personal retaliation but rather by the methodical application of universal laws that uphold the harmony between light and dark in all facets of life. Possibly the most poetic justice the cosmos has ever devised was the last stage of their destruction. The creature started bringing in more enforcement officers, other jinn, angelic beings, and consciousness forms that don't even have names in human language through their own summoning chambers. They were turning their hallowed places, which they had spent decades consecrating for sinister ends, into cosmic courts where their spiritual transgressions were being decided by rules that existed before galaxies were formed. As these extra protecting forces set up permanent stations surrounding your energy field, you sensed the change in your own spiritual environment. Your capacity to separate truth from falsehood improved, your meditation depth deepened, and your intuition sharpened to the point that you could spot efforts at spiritual manipulation before your attackers' ideas had fully developed. The gifts that they had repressed and feared were suddenly functioning at levels you never would have thought imaginable. The cult members had a revelation that destroyed what little sanity they still had as their organization died. They understood that their attacks had never really threatened you since your protection had been so complete and your spiritual support so unwavering. The years of resources they had dedicated to your ruin, the months of horror they had tried to inflict, and the sacrifices they had made to organizations that promised surefire outcomes. It had all been theatrical, unimportant to the cosmos. The question that used to reverberate in their emergency meeting, "How is this person still alive?" was allowed to linger only long enough to justify their removal. Now echoes through the cosmos with its conclusive response. A force that turns every attack into ammunition, every curse into a blessing, and every attempt at annihilation into fuel for unstoppable ascension protects certain souls. It wasn't luck or happenstance that you survived. It was the unavoidable outcome of heavenly protection so complete that the cosmos had come together to guarantee the fulfillment of your quest. Now is your time, selected one. The conflict is over. The light has the victory, and your divine mission is waiting for you to fully accept it. Instead of destroying you, the jinn they called upon has become the tool of your complete freedom. Furthermore, your God has once again shown that no weapon created against the divinely ordained would succeed. If this message touched your heart, don't leave without spreading the light. Click like so this wisdom can reach more souls searching for truth. Subscribe to Holy Voices so you never miss the next divine word prepared for you. And write your thoughts in the comments, your voice matters here. Until next time, keep walking in faith, keep growing in wisdom, and remember, the journey of the wise never ends.